So I just finished a oil painting class that was a lot of fun. But one of the things that a lot of the students had trouble with was color mixing and color matching. And in this video, I want to go over one of the most, I guess, influential tools or best tools that I can give you for color matching and color mixing. And that is making color charts with your limited palette. I'm going to go over the color charts that I've made before with the Zorn palette and my alternate Zorn palette. And then we're going to make a brand new color chart based on a new palette. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of work. Sit back, relax, and I'll show you how to do it. I love tea. I especially love tea in my cat mug. Definitely. So yummy. So yummy. Super yummy. Okay. So what are you looking at here? You're looking at a bunch of boxes that I drew on this paper, okay? I'm still painting on the same exact thing that I always paint on, which this is actually Stonehenge oil paper, and I gessoed it with a gray gesso, a neutral gesso. You can see it matches my palette almost perfectly, which is fantastic. I think it's so much easier to see color on gray than it is on white. And oops, I hit the mic. And I think you can really see a difference here. So on the right side is the Zorn palette. I'll go over that. And on the left side is my alternate Zorn palette. See, I really feel like these colors are easier to see. I also think that maybe my camera is a bit too bright. Let's see, I'm going to tone it down a second. Okay, that's a bit better. Now you can really see. Like this white is just blown out, even with my current camera settings, which are getting pretty dark. But look how much better you can see these colors on gray. I think that is so important. Painting on gray for me is super important because the intensity of this white, and a lot of us will just grab canvases right off the shelf and not gesso them, not change the color. Or there's a lot of artists I see out there that do, instead of a gray background, some kind of muted tone background to help them see the colors. And a lot of times those colors will help them with whatever they're painting. But we're going to do this on gray because I think it's easier to see those colors. Now, this was the first color chart I made, and I did this months ago when I started out with the Zorn palette, which the Zorn palette, if you don't know, is yellow ochre, which is right here as well, yellow ochre, cadmium red light, right there, cadmium red light, we'll say ivory black, and then white will always be part of this because we do gradations from the color to white in that way. So this is not every single possible color that you can mix with the Zorn palette, but it's pretty darn close. And the one thing I will say is that doing this with a limited palette is so much easier. If you have even one more color on your palette, this whole thing would double, maybe triple in size, and you'd be mixing up a million colors. The great thing about this practice is you get an idea in a limited scale. Ooh, I balanced that there. You get an idea of what this palette can do, what you can mix with it, how far it can go, how far you can push it. The things you can take away from this right away is looking at how intense cadmium red is compared to everything else. Also, what is not here, you won't get very intense greens. Like the most intense kind of green you can get is this with the Zorn palette. You won't get any intense blues. All you have are these kind of grays here. And this is intentional. This isn't a limitation. You don't have to have all of those colors. Now, if you're painting a landscape with a super bright blue sky, you would probably want to add blue to this palette to extend it. But this will give you a wonderful starting point to do 90% of your painting, especially figurative painting. If you're a landscape artist, don't think this will work for you too well because you're going to want those intense greens and intense blues all the time. But starting out in a limited palette is so important. Why is it important? Because if you have 15 colors on your palette, it's so much more difficult to figure out color combinations and to remember color combinations or mixtures that you can do with that you'll be fighting it forever. Or the alternate would be starting out with different primaries. Now the Zorn palette is based on primaries. Your yellow is yellow ochre, your red is cadmium red, and your blue is ivory black. Those are your primaries, yellow, red, blue. Now, if you started out with extreme primaries, so let's say a cadmium yellow or a bismuth yellow, super bright yellow, bismuth yellow. Wow, the lights are just still so bright, so bright. Can't see that. All right, let's darken it a little bit more. Gonna be doing some editing on this video. Okay, I darkened up the camera again so that you could actually see the yellow. Okay, so a super bright yellow, that's still a primary. You could do that. You could keep the cadmium red because that's a super bright red, and then replace the ivory black with a blue. Let's say you did that. You had these three primaries. Well, that would get you a more broad color range because you'd be able to reach almost everything. You'd be able to reach your super intense greens, your super intense blues, or somewhat intense blues, super intense reds and oranges. You'll be able to do all that. But the issue with that is, again, you have this wide range of colors. And for most of what, at least I paint, and maybe what you paint, you would be neutralizing those colors, constantly fighting those colors to bring them down, neutralize them. Where this palette has an accent of your cadmium red and your neutrals, lots of neutrals to neutralize things. This is perfect for figure painting and portrait painting. That's why I picked this, because I do figure painting and portrait painting. But I also wanted to change it up. I wanted to expand this a little bit or limit this a little bit more. And that's why I created this alternate Zorn palette. Now, this is basically the Zorn. We still have our yellow ochre, but for cadmium red, I put burnt sienna instead. So I went to burnt sienna because I was like, man, I'm never using the intensity of this cadmium red. I'm just using burnt sienna. So let's try that. And then I wanted more bluish grays. I was always yearning for those bluish grays and something a little bit more green. So I replaced ivory black with Payne's gray, which has a very cool bluish tone to it compared to ivory black. Ivory black is a very warm black, and you can probably see that if I compare these two charts together, how warm this gray is. If I can get them close together, how warm this gray is. Hopefully you can see that to the bluish color here. On the camera, there is some difference. In real life, there is a big difference. There's a much bigger difference. So really interesting change on that. And I was using that palette for a while. So Payne's gray and no, that's transparent oxide, right? And these two, replacing them. So a little bit more, I would say a little bit more harmonious, not those extreme reds. I wasn't really using those. Although lately I went back to the Zorn palette, right? And just kind of muted things down a bit. But the one thing I really loved was going to the gray paper. Now, influenced by Nicholas Uribe, as always, because I love the paintings that he makes. He recently was trying out different mixtures. And what I want to try this time on our new color chart is replacing the cadmium red with transparent oxide, transparent red iron oxide. Okay, it's a warmer, well, not warmer than cadmium red, but it's a warm red, but in the muted side. And then a phthalo blue. These are both from M. Graham. Specifically, this is PR101 and this is PB15:3. So specifically those two colors. So our new color chart will be similar to this on gray, yellow ochre. Burnt sienna will be replaced with transparent red iron oxide, and then our new black will be phthalo blue. And why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Well, I could start paintings and just begin a new figure painting with these two colors on my palette. And maybe I add them to here. But I have no idea what these colors will do, what their possibilities are, especially mixed with yellow ochre or white or mixed within themselves. I don't know how powerful they are with mixtures, how strong they are, because some colors will just dominate other colors. Just a little dab of phthalo will probably take over the whole palette. I don't know how strong they are. So I'm going to do this color chart to help me learn not only what kind of mixtures I can make with those, but also the mixing properties with those paints as well. And then after that, I'll have this color chart next to a bunch of paintings that I'm going to do, because that's super important. When you make these color charts, you want to keep them next to your easel or your table or wherever you work, so you can constantly reference them. And if you have multiple one of these, like I do for different palettes, if I'm picking a new subject matter, I can switch between these by just switching out my palette quickly, and I'll have a nice color chart to work from. At some point, I'm going to remake this on gray. That would be really nice. But it's a wonderful reference point. It gets you a better understanding of color, especially the colors that you're using, a better understanding of how those paints mix, and, especially the paint brands. If I had these colors in different brands, the mixing would be a little bit different. Each brand is different, right? So that's another important thing. So in my opinion, this is the best way to learn, or one of the best ways to learn color, at least how to mix them, how to get to the color that you want and you need quickly. And it takes a bit of work, and then constant referencing of these color charts while you're painting really helps. All right, so enough of the preamble. Let's get into it. Okay, one thing that I forgot to tell you about was how this actually is done, because there's a lot of specifics to this particular chart and how to do the mixtures. Okay. Now, this is just for a limited palette, white plus 3 other colors, and that's it. Like I said before, if I added one other color on here, this chart would probably double in size, because it's all about mixing every color with every other color plus white and a gradient to get an idea of what those colors look like with white. So there's 3 major columns that have 4 different columns inside of them. So this is yellow ochre and burnt sienna all the way down, well, at least to the middle here. So we got this section of 5 and 4, 20 colors. Okay, this section. Yellow ochre plus burnt sienna. And then we have this section of 20, which is burnt sienna and Payne's gray. Of course, this is this one. We're going to make a new color chart, right? So 20 colors here, and then 20 colors here, which is Payne's gray plus yellow ochre. Okay, you see how we went back to yellow ochre on that with some different mixtures. So that's very basic. Yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and then we add white to each one and bring it down. Now the mixture combination, like I'll stay in the center here, we have burnt sienna, and then we do 2 to 1. So 2 parts burnt sienna, 1 part Payne's gray, and then 1 part and 1 part. So 1 burnt sienna, 1 Payne's gray, then 1 burnt sienna, and 2 parts Payne's gray. See how we get closer to Payne's gray on this? Yellow ochre gets closer to burnt sienna. Payne's gray gets closer to yellow ochre. So we're adding a little bit more yellow ochre to that one, starting here and going to there, this kind of way. And then as we go down, like this is just plain burnt sienna, we get a nice gradation, 5 different tones or values. Burnt sienna right out of the tube, and then all the way down to just mostly white, and then in between within those. And then each of the mixtures within we do the same thing with, and that's how we get 20 colors for each of these 3 major sections. The bottom sections is the exact same at the top, but then our 3rd color is mixed in. So we have yellow ochre and burnt sienna for all these mixtures plus white, and then down here, yellow ochre, burnt sienna with a trace of Payne's gray and everything. You see how it goes to green here, a little bit green. Okay, see how it goes a little gray. We get some burnt sienna or some Payne's gray along with those mixtures. And then, but we flip it. So we keep the whites together, the lightest colors together. Okay. Same thing in the middle and in the right. Hopefully this makes sense. So this mixture down here, burnt sienna to Payne's gray, but we add a little trace of yellow ochre. So the one that's not here. Payne's gray to yellow ochre, we add a little bit, burnt sienna, right? Good. And then that produces almost every mixture we can make. And you can see there's some places where I've even added in like a middle tone. So it's, you know, kind of the in between these two. Like I wanted to see it like in this, while I was doing alternate paintings or something. You'll see a lot of little matching colors where I'm doing a painting and I want to match directly on my color chart to see if I'm getting close with that mixture. This is a useful tool, and use it as a tool. Don't frame it. You know, it's not an art piece to be seen, right? I mean, it looks beautiful, right? But it's meant to be used. So when you're painting other paintings, paint on top of this. Try dabs of little colors, things like that. It's meant to be used. Now, specifically on the mixtures, like I said here, we go right out of the tube, 2 to 1, 1 to 1, 1 to 2. Same thing throughout. But then as far as the value, 100% of out of the tube, 75, so 25% white, 50-50, so we had 50% white, so 25, so 75% white, and then 95% white here. And then we reverse it, 95, 75, 50, 25, 100% out of the tube. Go mostly to white. And as I do these, I'll review again. I know it's a lot. I know it's very specific. But yeah, there's a lot going on here. So let's try and go through it. So the first thing that you're going to do here is you're going to get a piece of paper like this, or a canvas, or something close to this size. This is 12 tall by 16 wide inches, okay? I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 squares wide with a 1/4 inch in between, and then 10 tall. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So as long as you can get squares that kind of work out that way, that'll be fine. As you can see here, I had messed up on a lot of these, you know, little tick marks, and it's not straight. It doesn't have to be straight, so don't worry about that. I don't think that this has to look like a perfect grid. No, that's not the purpose of this. What you need specifically is just a place that delineates where those colors go. And if it's a little wonky, that's fine. We can still see the colors next to each other. That's the most important thing. Okay, so that's important. 12 by 5. Okay, and then some space on the top, left, and side, so you can write down, you know, the colors you want. Okay. Now, one thing I did was I wrote down IR here for India red, because I was thinking about using India red for this column, you know, the replacement for cadmium red, because I couldn't find my transparent red iron oxide. But what's interesting about this is both of these colors are the same exact color. This is PR 101 and this is PR 101, like the technical term for the color. But also there's a PR 101 that is a red shade in M gram and a blue shade. I think that has to do with how they heat up the pigment. Depending on how long they heat it or make it hot, it changes colors. I'm not sure. There's science there that I have no idea about, but the IR here is incorrect. So I'm going to erase this and put TRIO, 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 transparent red iron oxide. And that's where that's going to go. It's really important to label the columns and then also put these slash marks in between these sections, because there's so many colors that we'll be mixing here that it's easy to get confused. Another thing I'll say is that it took me, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hours to actually draw all this out, besides gessoing the canvas or the paper as well. So this is a time-consuming thing. So be prepared for how much time you will spend on creating this chart, okay? Don't think it's just going to take a couple hours to make this chart. No, this takes multiple hours to make this chart. And any chart you make, it's going to take multiple hours. But what's great about it is while you're making this chart, you are learning. It's, you know, different than if you were painting, obviously, because you're making mixtures that's specific to a photo that you're working from or imagination that you're working from. But you're still making mixtures here, and you can still learn while you're making those mixtures. As long as you stay focused and you're thinking about what's happening to the paint and you're interested in what's happening to those mixtures, it's going to be really, really interesting. The next thing I want to say is for these, we want to keep all of the paint as clean as we can, okay? I'm going to leave cadmium red and ivory black on there because there's a lot of paint there and I don't want to waste it. I'm removing the yellow ochre from previous sessions because there was some different color inside that, and I want to keep these mixtures as clean as possible. As clean as possible. We're not going for super perfection here, okay? And you don't have to worry about if the gradations to white aren't perfect, or the transition from transparent red iron oxide to phthalo blue is absolutely perfect. You don't have to worry about making this gorgeous. I mean, you'll have some hiccups within this, some issues. That's part of the learning process. The more you do these kind of charts, the more that your eye will get used to making these types of mixtures, seeing the differences in value. In itself, the process of making it is super helpful. What you will want to do for your mixtures is use a palette knife, okay? You could mix this with a brush. You could even put it on with a brush, but I found that if I'm mixing with a brush, it just takes a lot more time. It's a bit more difficult to get the mixtures really nice and clean. Use a palette knife because you'll be going through a lot of paper towels. You'll make a mixture. You'll try and get as much paint off of this palette knife as possible. And then you want to clean your palette knife in your paper towel on a clean space on your paper towel as well. That way your palette knife is completely clean for your next mixture. So you're not really, so it's a process that you have to be somewhat clean for. Now I'm not going to put out my other colors yet because we're starting with yellow ochre. And as I showed here, yellow ochre is by itself in this first 5 rows, in this very, very first column in these five rows. It's just yellow ochre right out of the tube going to white. And that's the very first thing we're going to do. But we're going to mix up enough of that paint so we can do the next 5 mixtures as well, which will add in a little bit, not of Payne's Gray, but of the Phthalo Blue that we're going to use instead. PB, Phthalo Blue. I'm going to time lapse through these mixtures now. I'll see you on the other side. Okay, I'm going to jump in here right away to talk to you about a few things. There we go. About a few things that I already figured out with this. I mean, this isn't the first time I've done these, but it's been a while since I've done the last one. And yes, I made the lights really dark because yellow ochre is like a high value. And these lights are pretty close. And what's happening is I'm getting a ton of glare. So I want you to be able to see the color differences between, you know, what's on my palette, or these subtle changes between these values as well as I can. And only bringing those lights that far down was I able to actually see that. Okay, so that was one thing. The other thing is you're going to be using a lot of paint here. So what I would suggest when you're doing this for the first time, and maybe you don't have a ton of money, okay, use inexpensive paints. Find in your store, your art store, okay? I would suggest not to go to places like Walmart or Ross's, you know, for the United States. These places where you get like the super, super, super cheap oil paints. Some students brought that into my oil painting class. I can't remember the names of them. And they were so bad that, I mean, they were probably good for like super transparent working paint. They probably had their good uses, but they weren't near as good as what we would need here. So I would suggest student brands or M. Graham. M. Graham is pretty inexpensive. Winsor Newton Winton is inexpensive. Also, Gamblin makes a 1980 brand that's inexpensive. All those are really good. Look for the inexpensive brands of paint. If you want to do it in the most expensive paint, if you have the money for that, if you know, if you want to mess around with the paint that you'll actually be using, which I'm going to do here, I bought mostly M. Graham, which is fairly inexpensive, and I'm using Winton's, and I will be using those for the paintings that I'll be making. That's fine. But if you're like, want to go, I don't know, Old Holland and do this, that's up to you. You'll be spending a lot of money on paint just to make this, but if that's the paints that you use, then do that. Okay, enough said about that. The way you want to make these mixtures, especially for the values from yellow ochre right out of the tube to the 95% white, is in a certain order. So I did yellow ochre directly onto my canvas right away, so I can see what that looks like. I also put it on the far left side of my palette, and the very next mixture I did was 95% white. Okay, so I would have the extreme, like the most dark and the most light out of this mixture. Now for this paint in particular, yellow ochre is pretty light in value. So the transitions between are going to be very subtle. That's why I had to turn these lights down. The next mixture I made was the in-between mixture. That's why there's 5 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you did 4, you couldn't do the in-between. It's so much easier to do the in-between and make that mixture and kind of look at it and determine, does that look halfway in between the lightest light and the darkest dark that I can get here? Super helpful for understanding value, for mixing value right away, because you're trying to get that 50 in between. But it's okay, even if you don't get that, 50% in between, we still have some time, okay? So the next mixtures I made was the darkest one here. This was the 75% color, 25% white. And then after that, I did this one as well. Maybe in the other order. Doesn't matter on that order. But once I had all 5 together, I'm looking at them on my palette and I'm thinking, do these make a good transition? Is there a definite step between the lightest light and the next one? And the next one to the middle? And the middle to the next one, to the top one? Do we have a clear step between each one? If yes, then you're golden. You're good. You're golden. You're like yellow ochre, right? You're totally good. And then you can put them on your paper. But wait until you have your mixtures the way you want them here, the way it feels good to you, before you put them down. And even after you put them down, if like one of these colors is, after you put it down here, like maybe the step between these 2 colors here is too close, and they are really close. They're super close, but we're dealing with yellow ochre. It's going to be close anyways. But if you don't like one of those, you can scrape it off with a palette knife, okay? And then redo your mixture. Make sure that that transition works well, and then thickly put it over what you scraped off. It'll be just fine. I'll probably end up having to do that a couple times through this. But yeah, that's how you do those mixtures. Let me go back to the time lapse for the other mixtures. So there we go. The first column is done. Let me brighten up this left light a little bit. Oh, it really blows out. When I brighten up the light, those lighter colors get really blown out, but then you can't see the darker colors. Trying to, there you go. That might be pretty good. Okay. Oh, and then I'm kind of in the way, so let me remove myself. All right. The one thing, okay, well, not the one thing. I always say that. On this, what I did was I pulled down, scraped off the colors that I had before. So just plain yellow ochre, I put it down here. And then I took the smallest bead of phthalo blue that I could. Like, I don't even know, you probably can't even see that on the tip of my palette knife at all. Like this tiny, tiny, tiny little bead of phthalo blue. Now, I knew that phthalo blue, because working with it before, is a very powerful color. It's very strong. It will tint everything tremendously. If I pulled up a big chunk of that, every single thing on my palette, if I mixed up all of these colors, it would be more phthalo blue than anything. So that's one thing that you will learn. Like one of the colors I'm going to be using here, the transparent red iron oxide, I have no idea how it affects other colors. So I could destroy my mixtures with that, figure it out, learn from it, and then understand that color a little bit more. This is part of the process. So one little bead in each one of these. But every time I scrape down what I had here, I left a little bit up top. You can see that there's a little bit of that mixture left here. That was just in case I obliterated this mixture down here with too much of that phthalo blue. I had a little bit left over to bring down, to bring that back. And I did that with this white here. The very first thing that I learned was the Winton titanium white, and it's inexpensive student paints for a reason. It doesn't have as much pigment in it than the more expensive paints. So the phthalo blue just really crushed that white. I mean, I had to pull more white into this mixture and actually a little bit more yellow ochre, both of these, because I pulled up just a little bit too much phthalo blue. So really understanding the interaction between Winton titanium white and phthalo blue from M. Graham. And it's specific, not only per brand, but also per color with those kind of mixtures. So that's another understanding. And then as you can see, these just beautiful colors here. Let me see if I can turn this down again. Whoop, that's brighter. Whoa, way too dark. I wish you could see this in real life. I'm sorry that cameras don't pick up as well, but this is a beautiful, like tealish kind of light color that's here. Just gorgeous colors. And then they get closer and closer to that yellow ochre, to the very muted greens, which is really nice. Let's compare it with yellow ochre mixed with Payne's Gray from this chart. I'm going to be careful not to put that in my palette paints. So you can see the changes. So this is all the same, just yellow ochre with white, same exact paints. Actually, I think what I'm using on this, I wrote it on the back, M. Graham Payne's Gray, M. Graham Yellow Ochre, and I lost focus. There we go. So M. Graham Payne's Gray, M. Graham Yellow Ochre, Gamblin Burnt Sienna, and Gamblin Titanium White. It's important, the brands, so you can understand that. And I'll be writing it on the back of this one, so I know that as well. But look at the differences in those. These are super muted because it's a grayish blue versus a very intense blue. You can definitely see the intensity changes in a lot of these. So fantastic. Wonderful colors right away. I'm learning a lot right away. Now let's continue on with the rest of the columns. The next column is going to be 2 parts yellow ochre, okay, with 1 part transparent red iron oxide. And then we're going to go down to white on that. The colors that I have on my palette right now, the ones that I mixed up, these all go in the garbage because I've already finished mixing up those colors. Like I told you before, we'll be using up a lot of paint. There's a lot of paint here, but it's okay. It's going towards a good purpose. Also, I say that a lot. Also, you will be using up a lot of paper towels. So keep your palette knife as clean as possible. I've already used up 1 paper towel and it's going to be per column. So yeah, you can probably buy stock in paper towels. Okay, I'm going to time lapse this, and I'll see you with the next insight that I have. Okay, already I'm learning more about this palette. I mean, this practice is so informative. It's absolutely fantastic. So, transparent red iron oxide from M gram is not very powerful. It doesn't have a very high tinting strength. I had to use a lot more of this to tint that yellow ochre right there than I would the phthalo blue. Phthalo blue, just a tiny bit, but for the transparent red iron oxide, had to use a lot more. So right away, I had to understand that. It's really cool. These made some beautiful mixtures. The one thing I want to bring up here is when we go through and we do right out of the tube, then 2 to 1, 1 to 1, and 1 to 2, these aren't like perfect amounts of mixtures. It's not about how much of the paint in volume or in grams that you use. It isn't 2 parts yellow ochre and 1 part transparent red iron oxide in the amount like you would make a recipe for food or something like that. No, this is for 2 to 1 in the way the mixture looks, in its visual mixture. For example, the same way in value. Halfway in between this mixture and that mixture looks like this, but it could take any different amounts of white versus that paint to make it look that way. So we're thinking about the way it looks. What does 2 to 1 look like for yellow ochre and transparent red iron oxide? So just 1 step closer to transparent red iron oxide, and then another step closer and another step closer. So we're thinking visually here, not about paint mixtures in the sense of making a recipe, okay? So that's really important. The other thing I did was I took transparent red iron oxide, I went ahead and put it here. It looks very dark in this camera, I'm sorry, but it has a very definite red cast to it. It's a really beautiful color. It's darker than burnt sienna, a little bit more red than burnt sienna. Definitely in like an India red color, definitely. But I put that there to kind of get a comparison. Probably the best next column to do instead of the one that I was doing would probably be the 1 to 1 column. That way we can get an in-between on the colors. So what is in between these two? Not only in value, but also in the color mixture itself. Not completely transparent red oxide, not completely yellow ochre, somewhere in between. And then I probably could have gotten my 2 to 1 and 1 to 2 a little bit easier. But I don't mind doing it this way as well. So I did those mixtures just exactly the same as I did yellow ochre right out of the tube, but it was a mixture of transparent red iron oxide and yellow ochre there. You can see I have a big pile of it still mixed up, just in case I need to make more of these. Again, we're using a lot of paint. This is part of the process. Now the next thing I'm going to do is add in that little tiny bit of burnt sienna to each one of these mixtures to see what I get there for the next mixtures down. So this one's going to be fun. I know it's going to be just the tiniest bead of phthalo blue. Did I say burnt sienna? Anyway, tiny bead of burnt sienna, phthalo blue in these colors, getting my colors mixed up, and we'll see what those make. All right, I'll see you at the end of that. And I'm back again, and that was super interesting. Again, man, all these mixtures, I'm learning so much. The one thing I want to mention is palette knife. Palette knife, palette knife, palette knife. Just learning how to manipulate a palette knife with mixtures and bend the palette knife to actually get it to conform to a shape that you want. Super helpful. Another thing that you can learn with this practice that is absolutely essential. How to scrape off something. I just scraped off this color here because I didn't think I did the mixture well. It was way too close to Phthalo Blue. So I remade the mixture, brought in a bit more of my initial mixture here of transparent red iron oxide and yellow ochre to remake that. These got a lot darker down here, definitely. So you can see the value change from these two. Do I want to bring those values back up? I don't think so. I think I'm going to keep them like they are. I will learn as I go. I'm not too worried about these values being very different. I mean, they do get darker up here as well. See the transition from just yellow ochre to yellow ochre plus transparent red iron oxide? Well, it makes sense that these would get darker and maybe even a little bit more darker in value because I'm adding a very dark color to them. That trace of Phthalo Blue, which is fantastic. Again, very muted tones, except for this one is not so muted. Although you can't see it in this darn light. My goodness, it's so bright. Let me see if I turn it down again. I can kind of see the lighter colors there when I really turn that light down. It is another reason why to do these yourself, because I see so much into these colors that you won't see because the camera just isn't picking it up. The camera's not picking it up. Maybe if I bought a nicer camera or something, I don't know, but not going to do that. Don't have that much money, right? Okay, so continue with that. Another thing I want to mention is for putting the colors down, I'm using just a small flat brush so I can get kind of like some sharp, get it into the box. If you use a round brush or a filbert brush, it's going to be hard getting those sharp edges. But at the same time, I'm not worried about if it's perfect. You can see that these squares are not perfect. That doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be perfectly sharp squares on either side. And I keep getting text messages, and it's very annoying. They don't have to be perfect, okay? What matters is that we can see the difference in these colors, that we can understand the transition through these colors, understand the palette that we're going to be using, and understand like how these colors affect one another, how we can be able to make these mixtures again. If I look at my reference and I see this color in my reference, I know where to go to get that. It's yellow ochre, transparent red oxide with a lot more white, but mostly, it's just yellow ochre, white, and phthalo blue. Mostly white, just a little bit of yellow ochre. Yeah. See, I can get that mixture here. I can see that and I can repeat it. I can learn it and I can move forward that way. Okay. I'm going to continue on with doing more and more columns, but that's going to be on another day. This is one day of work. It took me 2 hours to get this far. Of course, I'm explaining some things. Took me about 2 hours just to do the lines. Took me 2 hours to make these mixtures. So be prepared for an amount of time on this. And spend that amount of time. Really sit with these colors. Begin to understand how they get more muted down at the bottom here because, which makes sense, I'm making kind of an orange color with this transparent iron oxide and then adding a complementary to it will bring, the phthalo blue will bring them into a very neutralized tones. So that's something I've learned. If I have a mixture of yellow ochre and transparent red iron oxide, adding blue can neutralize. Depending on how much of that blue I add, more and more gets neutralized. If I want to get this intense green here, right? And I know up in here when I'm adding just phthalo blue and white, these greens are going to be super intense. I can't wait. I want to see how intense of a blue we can get with just white and phthalo. I find this just so interesting. Whoa, look at that blue. That is crazy time blue. Compared to everything else that I've ever mixed up on all of my palettes. I mean, let's bring this one back. I have to fit it in here so I don't get it into the wet paint. But look at the difference in this blue versus the bluest I can get with Payne's gray. I mean, there's such a tremendous difference there, isn't there? So the range of blue intensity that I can reach is tremendous. I mean, I can make almost the same color as the blue painter's tape. Fantastic. Really, and I know now, this palette is going to definitely open up that area. And I wonder what it's going to do with these reds here. So this transparent red iron oxide plus white. What are we going to get for that? Wow, that's a really nice rusty kind of red color. Definitely not near as intense as our cadmium red. Not near as intense, but a very nice rusty red there. And then how do they interact when they're mixed together? What do I get in that mixture of them? Oof, look at that wonderful neutral that happens there. That's nice. There's so much I can do with that. So many possibilities right in there. And this is what those color charts are about. Not only do you get a better understanding of this palette that you're working with in this color chart, not only do you get a better understanding of how to mix with a palette knife, how to keep your colors clean, why it's important to be on a glass palette. That's another thing, being able to clean that up really well. How to mix these colors with a palette knife, but you also get this deeper understanding of how colors interact with each other. What does it mean to neutralize a color? What is cooler than, warmer than? What is yellower than? What is lighter than, darker than? Values, understanding values in a very subtle way, seeing the difference between these two values when you mix them up, even though they're so close together, and being able to see this transition of values from dark to light. One of the best practices that you can do, color charts. Get a color chart, then make a bunch of paintings after it. That's another important thing. Don't sit there and make color charts for days. The idea on this, I'm going to get my face back. The idea on this is to inform your painting, not as a replacement for painting. There's a lot of times when artists tend to move away from what they're trying to make, something that they're interested in, right? And they begin learning, doing exercises. And after years, they forget, why am I here? what did I want to paint at the beginning? When this should be in service to your next painting. I already have my next painting lined up, one of my next paintings lined up, and I knew that these two colors here with a color chart is what I wanted to use, but I wanted to get a better understanding of these colors for that painting. This color chart is not for itself, not only for all the amazing things that you'll learn from it, but it's also for the next paintings that you will make afterwards, okay? It's in service to. Always remember that. It's in service to. Okay, it'll be just seconds for you, but it'll be a whole day for me. I'll continue on this tomorrow. See you then.